Hey, what's up, everybody? This is an open discussion with C3 Films. My name is Chris, and this is.
Cheryl.
And today we're going to be talking about the Netflix television show to the Neil Gaiman comic, Sandman. So if you haven't seen it, we are going to spoiler territory. So if you want, go and check it out on Netflix first, then come back and see what we have to say about it. So we're going to go right into spoiler territory. So let's go ahead and just jump right into this. I haven't read the comics. I'm just gonna flat out say I've never read a Sandman comic. My cousin, I think she's a really big fan of Sandman. I know that Sandman is now owned by DC Comics, but I don't think Sandman was always a part of DC Comics. So, and I know Neil Gaiman is a really famous writer creator and has a lot of seminal stories. And I know that this is one of the ones that's most attributed to him. And I when I saw the trailer for this show, I was very worried because even though I didn't have any relationship with the source material, I've seen how Netflix has handled other comic book adaptations on their show. Like we have for every Umbrella Academy, we have at least four or five Lock and Key, or was it Lock and Key or whatever. There's a lot of different ones on there that are based off of graphic novels that don't do that well or that aren't that successful. So seeing the trailer and knowing that about Netflix, I was worried. And when you said that you wanted to talk about it, I of course wanted to talk about it too because it was new, but I did not expect to actually like it. And one of the things that caught me by surprise immediately going in was how much lore they just jump right into. And where it's just like you are in an established world, get in line, get on board, and get ready for a wild ride because we're just going to start throwing terminologies at you, people at you, and you're going to figure it out. And that's just how it's going to be.
So I also have not read the comics or the novel, but it's my boyfriend's favorite all-time graphic novel. And so I think it got really hyped up for me in the sense of it being highly anticipated. And I think I first heard about it when I heard about the casting for Desire and how they casted someone that was non binary. And I think that's what excited me the most. And my boyfriend had explained to me about how it's actually a perfect cast for that character. And it kind of just, snowballed from there in the sense of when we finally got to watching it. Um, I felt like the best way to decide how good it was by observing my boyfriend watching it. And I kid you not, like, it started with, the raven flying through the dream. There's the my favorite thing, voiceover, but it worked for me because I think the casting was really well, and just the idea that this novel has a lot of lore. I think it kind of needs that, and I think that's what I also said for Lord of the Rings and that kind of voiceover. You just kind of need that backing, but they
Mm-hmm.
laid it over this really I don't know, like it was a very interesting imagery to see, like the gates of the dream world and just all these little pieces. And I just like heard my boyfriend say, they're all there. And then I looked at him and he had like this tear coming down his face, and I was like, is this a movie? Am I like, is my boyfriend reacting to this opening of the show a movie? And I think like from then, like the whole time I was nervous that it was gonna let him down, but he was very pleased by the whole thing. Um, and I asked him if it was really close to the actual novel, and he said yes. They stuck very close to it. They did change some things, but he said that he could see why because it would work better for the show. And he also told me that it's been said before that this novel is like impossible to
Adapt.
adapt, but somehow they pulled it off. I don't know how they did it, but they made right. They followed the book as close as possible, and I think that's probably the best decision. I don't know why people don't just stick to the book. Like, just do it. It's not that hard. It's already made for you. So, I mean, like, there's some things I can get why you would need to change, but again, if you do it right, people won't be mad at you. And apparently, that's it. By the way, all of you out there in the chat, if you guys have any comments to bring up, please do let us know because neither of us have read the novel, so we would love to have your perspective on things.
And my friend and I watched it with a friend, the first episode at least, and I watched like three more by myself. So I watched a total of four episodes up until this point, and we immediately started liking it. But the reason we started liking it was because it felt very comic booky. Like the moment you jump in and you're starting to see all these worlds and the Raven and you hear the stories and like you hear how Morpheus Dream is talking about their sibling or his siblings like desire, death, despair, and all of them, and like they're just immediately just talking about all these different aspects of this world, and then how he needs to hunt down a rogue nightmare, but then he gets like pulled and trapped in this orb, which is important because that's going to be the catalyst for everything that comes later in the story. But we were watching this and thinking to ourselves, one, this feels like a movie, and two, this feels like a comic book. Like they create the creativity behind this person that controls dreams and nightmares, and the fact that he's being captured makes it so that certain people don't wake up from dreams, and some people can't sleep at all, and and how it just starts to really affect all these other aspects of our world because of the actions of a magus that wanted to get more power, or he didn't necessarily want more power. What he wanted was to have his son return to him. He was trying to trap death, but trap dream instead, and so it's just kind of unfortunate. And then they steal all of Dream's tools, and that's also important because that's going to come into play later. And so when you're watching it and you're seeing how the story unfolds, I really enjoyed that first episode a lot because I found it very interesting, especially because the only time you really hear Dream speak in that episode is through narration. Um, and when you see Jessamy, the Raven, and how the Raven works really hard to save him, and then up until that point, the kid, you feel bad for him because he has an overbearing father, and he even tries to connect with Dream and say, "Hey, I can save you, I can release you," but then the kid kills Jessamy, and that's important because the fear of repercussion is what leads the kid to never let Dream go because he is worried about repercussions for the action that he took against Dream, even though he was a good person up until that point. And so, even just within this first episode, you have these complicated characters and these complicated scenarios, and he keeps trying to tell Dream, "Hey, I'll let you go. Can you just promise not to hurt me?" And then Dream doesn't promise anything. And even when Dream does escape, Dream does seek revenge. So it's almost like his fears were warranted. But then even then, the only reason Dream was released was because of the other guy's boyfriend or husband. He's the one that like purposely lets Dream out.
Mm-hmm.
So I that first episode really worked to pull me in. And if it wasn't because of the fact that I had other things that I also had to do during this weekend, I probably would have watched more episodes than I've already watched.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting though because the I didn't realize that it was gonna be like this. Had I not had my boyfriend explain to me that they're gonna do two storylines in this first season, so it did feel a little bit disconnected though for those of you who watched the whole thing and also did not read the novel like me. It did feel a little bit interrupted. It felt like there was a like a filler episode, but I really liked that episode that separated it. But apparently it's the ending of the first arc and the beginning of the second arc. So
Hmm.
it's really interesting. So I'm really interested to hear what you would have to say after you finish watching the whole season. But the fifth episode, like I mentioned to you earlier, is my favorite episode. And I know you didn't get to watch it, but it's gosh, it's so hard not to talk about it because of how much I like about it. But it's just it's really cool because you'll start to kind of see how things are all connected, and they're like even just being contained to the first season, I could see how things from the first arc come to play in the second arc. And from
Hmm.
what was explained to me, there was nothing in the show, and there were no characters in the show that didn't matter. And they, like even the person, and I'm gonna spoil this a little bit for you, but not in a way where you won't be able to watch it. But you know that the diner episode.
Mm-hmm.
So you know the lesbian um, woman calls someone on the phone looking for her girlfriend, asking her if she had seen her girlfriend.
Seen her. Yeah.
That person that she was talking to on the phone is an important character.
Mm.
It's not just like
Okay.
a regular, like a random individual that we never see. So
Right.
so that's kind of cool. Like we don't really get to see that in these kind of shows where like literally every person is has an important role, or is important to someone else.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And yeah, I appreciate Casually Awkward that little bit extra information. I didn't realize that that was an actual epidemic that had happened during the early 20th century. So they got to play off of a real world like event and kind of tie it in to this idea of this fantastical element. So I really did enjoy that. And there's also elements about this that make me wonder what Sandman how Sandman ties in, like within the comics world, not necessarily within the aspect of the show, how Sandman ties into the DC universe. Because once again, Sandman is connected to DC, and Sandman has appeared in DC Comics, has talked to people like Batman. But there are certain things that pop up in Sandman that also pop up in Constantine. So in Sandman, they mentioned the House of Mystery, which is House of Mysteries, which is a house that John Constantine has used in his own stories. And even the whole thing about having the Constantine family and how they're like also mages that have to like deal with like hell, and the Joanna Constantine lost a child to hell, which is a very similar storyline to what happened with John Constantine. So it made me really ask and wonder if in the I don't because I really don't have any connection and idea about how these characters could be connected or how these companies developed these characters and how they eventually decided to put them together. But it made me really wonder if in John Constantine's own comic books has he also had run-ins with the Sandman, with Morpheus, and if they have those characters interact, because there's so many elements that I recognize from the Constantine comics that are popping up in the Sandman lore, and I think that's very interesting. I also like how Sandman is playing with other established characters that we know, like Cain and Abel. We meet Cain and Abel, I think, in episode 2, and we know the whole thing behind that is Cain killed Abel, and now we have in this dream where Cain is just constantly killing Abel over and over again, and Abel is just reviving over and over again. The first, as he said, the first murderer and the first victim. And so I just thought like that was kind of interesting, and there's a bunch of different things similar to that within these different episodes where they're just building up this world, and it might not even be something that might come back immediately, but it all serves to give character to this greater universe that we are now getting the opportunity to travel through. And that's what I'm really starting to enjoy.
So I can tell you that Constantine is actually in the take is involved in the story, and I know people are explaining stuff to us in the chat, but I'll just say real quick that
Mm-hmm.
that we do get Constantine later, but in the book Constantine is actually Constantine, but in the show it's Joanna Constantine, and
Okay,
yeah, I believe they
I
did
was
that
wondering,
for because there's already property
John.
rights
to
for
John
Constantine.
Constantine.
Yeah.
That makes a lot, because that's the reason I brought it up, because I know a lot about John Constantine, and the stuff that was happening with Joanna seemed very similar to what would happen with John. Because also with John, just like with Joanna, he is I want to say he's bisexual, but I think he's actually more than that. He might actually be pansexual, but point is like, but Joanna also is that. So I was like, there's too many things that are connecting. So that's why I had to ask the question. But thank you for
Yes.
like making that more clear for me.
But Joanna Constantine is also in the show. So they're both in, like, both characters, the John who is Joanna and Joanna Constantine are both in the show. Um, it's just that they just call all the Constantines Joanna, from what I understand, in the first season of the show. And then
Mm-hmm.
to answer your question about like the how involved it is in DC World, the way it was explained to me, I don't know if it's in the comments right now, but there are characters from DC that are in the novel, and I guess a good way to put it is kind of like how, Jessica Jones, how they kind of talk about the Avengers, but they don't actually have the Avengers as part of it. I think there are
Mm-hmm.
some characters that appear in the novel, but the company that produced the novel was like an independent company of a bigger company. So
Right.
DC had like a smaller company that was producing these novels, but still had like it take place in the same DC universe. But let's go ahead and cover those comments.
I mean, yeah. Feel free to like talk about them. But yeah, like we mentioned, yeah, I see that you mentioned that it was originally John Constantine in the graphic novel, so that definitely like makes sense. I'm glad that I can like recognize that, and that that's actually what was happening. Um, but I was really kind of curious as I kept watching, was just like, so with the first episode, when it ends, we find out more about it's going to what the story is more going to entail, right? We find out that, okay, this is what the story is going to be about. It's going to be about him tracking down his lost tools and having to and having to get them back. And they're all in these different places, so that's going to be the storyline of him going to these places, tracking them down, getting them back, and then at the same time we have this nightmare that's on the loose, and we're gonna have to deal with this nightmare with teeth for eyelids, and which I love that look, by the way. Like it's so creepy. I like that actor too. So all of that is just, it just works for me. But you were mentioning that your favorite episode was episode 5. My favorite episode is actually episode 4, where they have to go to hell. Oh, excuse me. Yes, because literally they go to hell, and they do, and I'm guessing this is directly taken from the comic, but they do a game, a competition game. And even when they were doing the competition game, I remember thinking to myself, Morpheus, you gotta know, in a situation where they can name whatever champion they can name, this dude is not gonna fight you. This dude is not going to be the one to fight you. Like, I was just saying, if I was you, I would name Lucifer. I would say, Lucifer, Morningstar, you can be my champion. But he's confident in that moment and thinks to himself, I'm gonna just win, and then gets set up for the okey doke. But I liked how that game was handled, and I'm really curious. I want to read how it was done in the comics, because obviously things like this are easier to do in comics. But I feel like, as someone who hasn't experienced that in the comics and the first time experiencing it in the show, I liked how they tied it together. I liked how it worked. I liked how they would say the thing that they were, and then we would see the things interacting, and then we would see the result of those interactions appear on the characters' bodies. And like, that was very cool to me. That worked very well, even though essentially they're doing the thing that we used to do with kids, where we're just saying, well, I'm better than you because I have a gun that shoots laser. Well, you're like, well, I have a laser shield, so you can't beat me. Like, that's essentially the game that they're playing. But it's very cool with the way that it's done, and of course it escalates until the point where it's just like, you can't beat me, and then he throws out hope. um so I was like, okay, that's a cool way to end it. And Lucifer has no choice. And then, even with the whole thing about like the dreams, Lucifer saying, you have no power here, and dreams have no power, and Dream looking at him like, excuse me, her, Gwendolyn Christie, who's also amazing Game of Thrones rep, which a couple of Game of Thrones rep. First episode has Tywin Lannister too, but looks at her and says, "Yeah." I mean, what are dreams? How does hell work if people can't dream of heaven? And you're like, oh man, that's good. Oh, that's really good. and then and Lucifer's just like, yeah, I gotta let you go, but I really don't like you. So
Yeah, no, he
I
really got
enjoyed
on
it.
her bad side, and I was like, "Ooh, you're really getting on Lucifer's bad side here, making me
Right.
nervous." Yeah,
But
yeah. I
it's
mean,
great.
and the casting for Lucifer, Gwendolyn Christie, I I'm just amazed. I mean, I already knew that she was a really good actress, but I didn't think I would ever like see her as someone like super scary and
Yeah.
intimidating. And the way that her outfit was too, the design for her outfit with the wings, I thought was awesome, and how she starts out with a white.
I
Right.
yeah.
I mean, when you think Lucifer, you think dark, scary man with a beard and everything. But here you have a woman, Lucifer, who looks like an angel, but then her outfits change and they become red later. And so, but I thought that was a really cool way to visually represent Lucifer. It's very unique. I don't know if it's like that in the novels, but for something being from the 80s, being written in the 80s, and even up until like nowadays, you don't really see um, Lucifer or the devil depicted as a female.
It depends. I mean, if you remember the original Constantine movie with Keanu Reeves, Lucifer was played by Tilda Swinton.
Oh no, I didn't know that there was that movie.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So no, it's okay. It is done, but I think generally you are correct. But it is something that is done because the idea is that Lucifer can look like whatever Lucifer wants to, and so
Mm-hmm.
a lot of different stories have Lucifer like being different genders just because Lucifer can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's like the other thing. Like, there's just so many things to talk about, so I'm trying to like not jump all over the
Yeah,
place.
all over the place.
But like, seriously, the sexuality in this series is crazy. Like, we already start off with a homosexual couple at the very beginning with Alex and Paul, and then like
Hmm.
as you go further into the series, you see more and more couples that are not straight, and it's so refreshing to see that. And like there is a good mix. There's a good mix of different faces, like in terms of races. There's
Hmm.
just a lot of good mix, and like my thought is just I can't believe this was written in the 80s, and I don't know if this is exactly how it looked like in the graphic novels, but
Yeah.
I was very pleasantly surprised to see how diverse and unique the cast was, and the relationships were. And again, like I'd mentioned before, the big one was the casting for Desire being a non-binary person,
Hmm.
um, and that was considered a good cast, I guess, because in the book, uh, Dream would call Desire brother sister.
Right.
So I think good move there.
No. No. Yeah. Absolutely. And no, thank you. By the way, casually awkward. I actually that is completely my error. You're right. It was Peter Stormare that was Lucifer in the Constantine movie. Um, but it's just funny because Gabriel's the final is like the bigger problem in that movie is the villain. So in my mind, I was like, oh yeah, Gabriel is the villain, and Gabriel is Lucifer. Tilda Swinton is Lucifer. But you're completely right about that. Thank you for that. Um, but yeah, so and Tantina, you said that your boyfriend said that it must have been a progressive comic because he said the same thing too. So that's interesting because I wasn't. I like I said, we haven't read the comics, so one of the things we don't know is how much of this is comics accurate versus modern day casting. Because like these things can change a lot from page to screen. So absolutely. And I like the fact that there is such a high level of diversity of characters and representation within the show itself and within the story. And I also just like how the story progresses itself. I wasn't sure what the rating on this story would be. I wasn't sure if it would be something um that would be like rated R, for instance, or PG-13. And throughout that first episode, I was like, how dark is this gonna get? And the show gets pretty dark. It gets pretty dark. It's definitely R rated. Like within the first episode, you hear F bombs thrown all over the place, and within the first 3 episodes, you see a little girl get taken into hell and lose her arm. So it is definitely something that is, um, you know, like you got to prepare yourself for if there's certain things that might might bother you. Um, but I do like even how they are portraying Morpheus's growth, because Morpheus does come across as a character who is only concerned with his own well-being, with his own like tools, and he gets called out for that, and then decides to try to do something kind. But there's he sacrifices the gargoyle because he needs his power back, but then he tries to still do something good by giving like a new gargoyle. He's gonna just leave the woman there where she's like suffering in her bed because there's nothing he can do. But then he gets convinced to like at least give her a peaceful goodbye, give her a peaceful death. So we get to see a little bit. That's what I'm talking about when we get to see different aspects of these characters, like even if it's just moments, and that suggests room for these characters to grow and change. So I'll be very interested in seeing how else this story will develop, but I'm actually very excited to see where this is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, not gonna lie, like just like I had mentioned earlier, there are two storylines in the first season, and you're kind of just right at the end of the first arc. So you kind of stopped at like kind of a perfect place because that's essentially where it ends.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the fifth episode, which is my favorite episode, like I said. So I'm
I'll probably
excited
watch
for
it
you to see
tonight.
it.
Oh yeah,
I can't wait to
and
hear back from you about it.
I'll message you. And yeah, and like the other thing, we talked about the casting briefly, but there's a lot of people you've seen. I believe the son John, he's played by somebody who I'm pretty sure we've seen in Harry Potter. I feel like he's been in Harry Potter before. I've definitely seen him in other things as well. His mother is played by a Nip Tuck alumni. Her name was Julia on that show, so she was cool to see in this. Like we already mentioned, Gwendolyn Christie, and I forget the guy's name who played Tywin Lannister. But there's a lot of famous people that appear in the episodes up until this point that I've seen, and so I'm curious if that's going to be something we get to see more of. If more of these characters that we see pop up are also going to be played by other well-known actors. But either way, I'm like excited to see these people involved in a show that is as interesting as Sandman has been so far. And I'm also impressed that with how conceptually heavy Sandman is, that Netflix hasn't really seemed to like falter on the visuals. Like there are some spots where you can see like a little bit of body like CGI, but for the most part, the CGI that we see within the show is pretty solid, I would say.
Yeah, and they're not afraid to do, some to play with around with some cool shots. Like for example, the stuff that they did with the Fates, where they kind of turned or swapped positions based on who was talking. So I
Mm-hmm.
thought the scene with the Fates was very intriguing, and they also come back. Um, the Corinthian comes back in the second half of the season, so it just all feels quite connected. It feels disconnected because there's two arcs, but then it also feels very connected because the people that you see in the first part of it, you also see in the second part of it, minus the people that died. So,
Right. Yeah, I want to see what happens with John's story, and now that he has this ruby um that Dream can't even use. And I thought it was pretty interesting seeing how John gave away the protection crystal, or the crest protection eye that was given to him by his mother, even after killing all these people. Like John is a very interesting character to me too, where he's definitely off, but it's almost one of those things of like, hey, lady, if you had just driven this guy to this place, you would have had no issues. He was fine with you. But the moment that you decided to do something, that's when like you got this poor gas station worker killed. So But he's a very interesting character too, and so I definitely am curious to see how his story and Dream's story is going to interconnect. And yeah, I definitely want to see some more of the siblings, the family, all of that. So I'll definitely be watching some more, and I'll at least hit you up when I get to see some more of these things. But it sounds like from all parties involved, from two people who don't know very much about the comic to the people that have read the comic and then are watching this show as an adaptation, it sounds like it's satisfying on all fronts.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I cheated a little bit because I had someone that read the novels kind of explain stuff to me, so I don't think I got the purest of perspectives in the
Experiences.
sense of not coming at it from not having read the novel. But I think it was I don't know if it was my favorite thing to watch, because I almost feel like I liked Prey, like liked watching Prey more than Sandman this week. But it was good. Like I'm excited for the next season, and I think I might read the novel before they even finish making the second season. So we'll see how that
Mm.
goes. But yes, I'm very excited for you to watch the rest of it. I'm also very excited to see the rest of the siblings. Not all the siblings appear, so
Oh, okay.
spoiler there. But
I-
I feel like they're giving us some flavor and keeping us wanting more. That's how I feel.
mm, okay. Well, like hopefully this does well enough to get a second season. It sounds like it deserves it, and from what I've seen so far, I definitely can see why. But is there anything else that you kind of wanted to like bring up that you want to get off your chest before we get out of here?
No, no, I think that was it.
Okay. But yeah, so that's what we thought about. That's what we thought about the Sandman show. And if you guys want to hear us talk more about this and other things, you can check us out on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/C3Films. It'd be great to see you guys over there. But what did you think about the Sandman? Did you Are you also somebody that read the comics, and are you seeing this and thinking that it is a good adaptation? Are you enjoying the casting? Are you enjoying the diversity? Are you feeling like maybe it's not as good as adaptation as you would want? And if that's the case, what would you like to see improved? What have you thought about it? Comment below. Let us know. And while you're down there, if you give us a like, share, subscribe. Even if you don't, though, I have been Chris, and this has been
Cheryl, and we'll see you all next time.